Aloha and welcome to the Embodied Healing Self podcast with your host, jenmons. Each week, join me for soul-inspired, conscious conversations around embodied healing and awakening to your soul's purpose. Thank you for listening in. Aloha, my podcast family. Welcome back. I'm so excited to be sharing another week with you all. So today's podcast comes from a request of a longtime podcast listener, and also something that I have noticed over the years in my coaching business that I just wanted to share with you. And it's the idea of spiritual toxicity. So the request that I received recently came from a lovely listener, and someone who has been in my world for probably 7 or 8 years since I was health coaching and teaching yoga. She's kind of followed me throughout the years, and we've worked together on and off, and she's just been wonderful at just evolving with me as I've evolved in my work. And so we've done everything from health coaching to energy healing. And so her request was around the need to speak about this kind of emergence, it appears, of like online coaching, specifically in the areas of spirituality. I myself have taken a step back from really calling myself a spiritual coach, just because I've seen and witnessed outside of me, and I've also had clients come to me that have had previous bad experiences. And I'm going to tell you, as my podcast community, that it happens. Oftentimes, not oftentimes, but every once in a while, I guess I should say, healers and coaches step into this space to heal themselves. And, I would have to say that many years ago when I began coaching, I've been coaching for 12 years, that's possibly how I entered the space. I began health coaching because I had so many amazing results in my own health crisis and that of my daughter and my family that I thought, well, I just really need to share this. But the difference is that when you've been coaching long enough and when you're certified, when you actually have the skills and you've been trained in some way and you've had the practice, that it is not about you. It is about your community. And what I'm finding is that there's a lot of coaches or people calling themselves coaches that are really influencers in the online world that are in the space because they're still healing themselves. And so if you happen to be a coach or a healer in this space and you're listening to this, it's really important for you to keep whatever it is that you're healing sacred until you're through it. You don't want to ever share from a place of when you're totally in that wounded place. And it's important for us as coaches and healers to find that support, so that when we show up in groups to speak or in a coaching session, we are completely grounded and open and ready to hold the space and facilitate transformation, healing, and guidance for our clients. And so we're going to talk about spiritual toxicity today, and it's really geared towards also just the space of coaching in general. I may even bring up some business coaching and life coaching, because I'm starting to see this trend in the online coaching business that really started, I think, blowing up even more since the pandemic, because a lot of people are realizing that we can work from home, and many people are really wanting to step away from corporate because they feel a lack of trust in structures and organizations. And I just want to say to those people, if you are a person considering doing that, just know that it's important to find yourself a good, solid coach and mentor, and also have compassion and patience in that space. I have a lot of women that come to me that feel or believe or want to just know that you can just magically build an online business and attract clients and replace your current income overnight. And it doesn't work like that. And if it does, it's probably not sustainable. So, not to sound like the negative Nelly, just being the realist here, and this is what I'm going to talk about today in Spiritual Toxicity. So, the number one thing I want to talk about is spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing, we saw a lot of, right, through the past couple years. I feel like there was a lot of people calling people out, which I think we should be calling people in the conversation. And, if we can all show up from a place of just recognizing like our own triggers and activations rather than projecting onto other people, we can just have much healthier communication when we can show up in a conversation and just be really honest about where we're coming from and how we're feeling and what we need. It just shifts everything. I've talked about it before. One of the tools I love is the 4-step process of NVC, nonviolent communication, not only in our conversations with other people, but in our conversations with ourselves. It's just like, we'll drop the link to that in the notes for NVC, but it's like checking in with the facts, not the emotions, checking in, and then checking in with the feeling that you're having, the sensation, which is not a projection of what somebody else is doing, and identifying our need, and then from there making a request. It's a really amazing, simple 4-step process that you can complete in a matter of seconds. And I would say that I practice it daily with myself, in conversations with myself, but then it also works really well in conversations with other people. So over the past 2 years, let's just go there, since 2020, like, emotions were high. We had Black Lives Matter, and there was an instance where I voiced my opinion about something, and not immediately, but just like a day later, just realized that my opinion was very much coming from my place and needed to be seen in my experience. And so I wrote a personal message to that person who happened to have been a mentor of mine over the years. And it was just a beautiful conversation of like, hey, I realize I came from this space. And she said, I realize I came from this space. And then it just unfolded this beautiful conversation about how we were feeling about all the things that were going on and what we needed and why, we love the work that we do to support women. And it was just really awesome. And I think that the former version of me would have just closed up and been really angry and felt really misunderstood. So what was happening is in that case, around that time, was the idea of spiritual bypassing. So what is spiritual bypassing? I don't even like to label things, but if you've been around somebody who is all about the light and the love and the positivity and, everything's so great and all you have to do is just show up in this way and like, you're going to welcome in your soulmate and you're going to welcome in money. And I use those words, but I also invite people in to do shadow work. So what I believe is that the way that, and maybe this is a belief to explore as well, but this is the opposite of spiritual bypassing, where I really do think that us as a whole being integrated wholly into the wholeness of who we are means all of the stuff that a lot of us don't want to see in ourselves. And so some people call it shadow work. Some people, there's all kinds of words for it. But what's important to me is that you don't walk through life calling yourself a coach or a mentor, bypassing the shitty stuff in the world, because it's there. We're human. And so, for example, say you have a friend who claims she is a spiritual person. And then when you have something that you're really struggling with and you're really needing support navigating that, she disappears because she can't handle it. Okay, that would be an example of spiritual bypassing. And so find a coach or a mentor that can hold all of that for you. Because what a coach and a mentor does is they hear that and they help you move forward. So different than a therapist, where you may spend a lot of time in the story of the past and really try to navigate what is that trauma response and that trigger. A coach, you may dip the toe in that, and then they help to move you forward. But what can happen sometimes in the spiritual community, and this is based on feedback that women have come to me with previous coaches, where the space just wasn't held for them. And it was traumatic because they believed when they were entering that relationship that they were just going to get the results they wanted, but they didn't have the tools or the guidance to work through the really challenging things that will come up before you grow and expand in your life. So I want to say that again. It's just like giving birth. There's always a contraction before an expansion. It's the cycle of life. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm willing to be wrong. It's my belief, in my opinion. Everything is in a cycle of contraction and expansion. And if you're willing to go into the contraction and be present with it, kind of like when you're giving birth, right? Like breathing into it, then the expansion on the other side, like you get to relax into it with ease and just welcome all that's coming. But when you resist the contraction, it's really painful, right? So to my ladies here that have given natural or vaginal birth, you know what I'm talking about. And that is the cycle of life. It's like the seasons that we have. It's the moon phases that we have. It's just, I mean, look at what's happening in the world right now. Like everything is in a cycle. And, sometimes things are really good and they feel easy. And then all of a sudden we enter a period of contraction for a couple of years. And so it's empowering to be in the space where you can be with all of the uncomfortable stuff. And it's wonderful to have a coach that will hold that space for you, where you feel safe, where you can trust. So spiritual bypassing is extremely unhealthy. It looks like pretending like everything is rainbows and unicorns, pretending like everything's really awesome, only talking about the positive stuff, not willing to hold the space for difficult conversations. And it also can look like, this is another thing that really kind of, I guess I could just admit that it kind of activates me a little bit, is, the concept of the law of attraction. Now, although I love many parts of it, I do believe in, reframing things to shift your perception, to welcome in more of what you want in your life. I do believe in the power of our mindset, and then shifting energetically into a new perception that creates a new reality, which is shifting our consciousness. I do believe that. And I do believe, in my opinion, that the experiences that happen in our life are there to reflect back to us parts of ourselves. But that doesn't mean that we're broken. It doesn't mean that we need to be healed. It doesn't mean that we're wrong. Matter of fact, I don't even think anybody's ever really healed. I think that we're all, transmuting and shifting and, quote, healing in the present moment, meaning we're really just shifting it. Even the name of this podcast, Embodied Healing Self, what that means is that you're never broken, and you're also never completely healed. You're just in it. We're just in the flow. Like it's a state of presence. It's a state of being that when we have conversations with people, every conversation in our life is an opportunity to notice and learn something about ourselves. It's also an opportunity to learn about that person. But we may notice sensations in our body that we might feel a little triggered or activated, and we can just be like, okay, that's interesting. We don't have to judge it. We don't have to label it, but just lean into it and just be curious about that's interesting. This thing happened, and I noticed that I'm feeling anger right now, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling resentment in some way. And just being like, what is that about? But not making anybody else, including yourself, wrong. And so, just being open to the curiosity of relationships rather than having to label or identify or project anything. One of the other things that comes through to me as spiritual toxicity when we talk about the law of attraction is when I hear coaches say, well, if this happened to you, look at what you did to attract this. That, ouch, right? Nobody who's in a place of feeling vulnerable ever wants to hear that. Now, in my opinion, it's an opportunity to just become curious. Okay, so there's a difference in the energy. Rather than saying, what did you do to attract this? Be curious. Just be curious about the entire experience. The way that it felt, the other person, the way that you felt in that experience. Because maybe there's something to lean into and to gather and to learn from. Maybe not. There are times where people are just jerks. 100%. There are going to be those times where, maybe you did attract an unhealthy relationship. That happens. But that doesn't make it okay for people to just be total jerks, okay? And there are a lot of manipulative people, especially in the spiritual and coaching space. And I don't want to say that to sound negative, but we think that when we enter this space, it's going to be safe and sacred, and it should be. It 100% should be, and it can be. So I'm going to do a podcast, and this was also another request from another person. I'm going to do a podcast on ways to empower you to interview a coach and a mentor that you want to hire. Because I think that's what's missing right now. I think that we're in a space of for online coaching, it's like we get an image through social media and we don't really know what to trust or believe, because sometimes it doesn't feel authentic and sometimes it's not, because influencers might not be coaches. So that will be a podcast coming up. But really just, I just want to say, sometimes we enter marriages that are unhealthy. We enter friendships and partnerships or business partnerships, or we just have, maybe it's even a neighbor, just somebody in the community that we just don't jive with. And sometimes maybe, something comes up and somebody says something and it hurts. And maybe somebody's projecting something onto you, or you're projecting something onto somebody else. And sometimes it's like a bully, like when you're a little kid, right? Like no kid deserves to be bullied. So when people say what did you do to attract this? I don't like that. That just doesn't sit well with me. I do believe that we can shift things. I think we can gather information in an empowering way, and that we can shift what's our energy so that we can show up differently in it. See, the difference is taking the experience in an empowering way to move forward. I do believe that, and a good coach or mentor, in my opinion, should hold the space for that, but not the space of if this terrible thing happened to you, then maybe you should take a look at, where you're misaligned. No, that doesn't feel good for people that are showing up vulnerably. And so, I had another word that comes through that can be a little bit toxic, and I've done a podcast on it, is the word manifestation. Manifestation requires aligned action. It requires a shift in the consciousness, but, there is this element sometimes in the spiritual community of you can just call it in and it will just happen. And I say it and so it is. And yeah, that's part of it if you believe it, if you can shift it, but it's also about what aligned action can I take to bring this into human form, because okay, this is another conversation. This is a different podcast, but the difference between ascension and embodiment, we are not here to ascend out of the body. We are here to embody spirit as humans. And so spiritual bypassing sometimes can be the avoidance of the pain and difficulty in the human experience. And the reason I get this is because about 5 years ago, when I was new on my spiritual path, not new, but at the next level, I was doing this. I was meditating for like 20 minutes a morning and just like, like literally going, like, it was, kind of almost like out of body, and kind of struggled to come back in and face reality. And I remember a voice in my head, and actually one of my mentors, I shared this with her, and she's like, what if you meditated with your eyes open? I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. So I'll stay more present. And it just became, very clear to me that we are here to have this experience, and we don't have to have the experience in pain. We can have a lot of joy. We can have all of it. That's what the human experience is. It's all of it. So another, I guess, sort of space to be aware of that I would consider spiritual toxicity is manipulation. Oh my gosh. I've talked about spiritual narcissism. So when I talk about the space of like healers and coaches entering the space because they need to be healed, just be really cautious and mindful as you navigate conversations with people, and just kind of notice, when you're in that. Now, remember, coaches and healers are human too. They're perfectly imperfect. But if there's like a consistent sort of feeling that they're not providing the space and showing up for you, then maybe have that conversation with them and let them know how it feels. If they're holding the space for a coaching session and you're asking questions and they aren't really willing to dive into what's not working for you, like they're not really willing to have those difficult conversations, and a lot of conversations or a lot of what they share are about them. Now, that might just be coming from a place of wanting to attract the right community and relating to them. Like, we do both of this, but when you're in that actual sacred space of like a one-on-one coaching session or a group session, it should, from a coach's perspective, be very much a 100% all about the client. And the healers as well, right? Like, if you're an intuitive healer or an energy healer, and I've done this work, so I know, like, you really got to clear yourself first before you can hold space for anybody else. You got to give yourself permission to have that time before the session to clear anything from any previous session, to clear yourself first. Commitment to that clarity is important before you hold the space for somebody else. So manipulation has been showing up interestingly in the online community. And from my perspective, all of this is my opinion, what people have shared with me. And I just need to speak to it because I myself have invested in coaches that didn't really have coaching skills. So I get that, there are so many people out there that you could choose to spend your resources with, time and or money, and not just coaches and healers, but even your friends. But if you're hearing words like, well, you attracted that, or spiritual bypassing, or somebody is not willing to show up for you when you're really struggling, that is not a true friend. That is not a true coach. That is not a sacred space, in my opinion. I think it's really important to make sure that you're there and to step up and really show up as a friend or a coach or a mentor. That's when you really step in. Now, without enabling, right? So there's a balance between truth and compassion. Too much truth can be harsh, too much compassion can be enabling. So from that perspective, make sure that the relationship is mutually giving and receiving 100%, because sometimes there are those people that are just really too much all into their story. And so it's our responsibility, whether a coach or a friend, to just say, hey, like, this just doesn't feel good for me. And, is there another, like, what is it that you need? And ask the person what they need. That would be a nice way to do that. But manipulation can show up when, especially with online coaches, like with just inviting, not even inviting, but just there's a part of it where they're just like really focused on results. So if you hear somebody saying that they can promise you're going to make this amount of money, or you're going to find this soulmate, or you're going to lose this much weight, I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how anybody can promise results like that. Now, they can share with you client results, which I think is great. But if you notice, there's a lot of people showing up online that are business coaches, because I'm looking to hire a business coach right now. I've had a couple of business coaches. I've had one every year since 2018. I'm looking for a new business coach. I don't want to hear about how much my business coach is making. I want to hear about the structure and the strategies that they share that have helped their clients. I don't want to hear about, because to me, that's just like, I've also witnessed, some coaches just showing up and being like, kind of going all in at this trust of like law of attraction, you got to spend more money to make more money kind of thing. And although I do believe that that's an invitation to lean into trust, like when you invest in yourself in a coach, you're saying like, I believe and I trust it. I believe in myself. I trust myself. I trust this co-creation with this coach. I do believe firmly in that. But I can tell you from all the different coaching programs I've been in, pretty much every time I've been in a mastermind or a coaching program, I've always had higher results than anybody else, and it had nothing to really completely do with the coach. There was guidance there, but it had to do with my willingness to show up, to be accountable, and my commitment. So even though I'm a coach, I'm telling you that we do all take self-responsibility for our experiences. Nobody's here to save us. Nobody's here to fix us. Nobody's here to completely magically change everything in our life. Somebody can be there to guide you and to show you the way, but ultimately it comes down to you and me and us to co-create our experience and to show up. That's the truth. Like, nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to fix you. Not even your husband or your wife. Like, it's all on you. And, some people might be listening, well, like, that's kind of harsh and not super compassionate. There's plenty of people out there to help you and support you. There are many beautiful therapists. I have a couple of friends that are wonderful therapists. There are amazing coaches. You might have your sisterhood, your tribe. You might have a really open relationship with your husband or your parents or your children that helps. And so those things are very, very special and sacred if you have those things. But manipulation shows up more in like broken promises. It also shows up, and this is a hard one. You kind of have to maybe dig a little, do a little research on this one, but I think social media makes it really easy for people to show up unauthentically. I mean, right? It really does. Like, it's really easy for social media influencers to sell the idea of something that we wish that we had, but are they really living it? And so, taking a look at like everything that they share, I think personally, if you're going to hire a business mentor or life coach, like what is the rest of their life like? Just be curious. To me, it's a value of mine anyways, to live in integrated wholeness and well-being. So based on your values, just be curious about the person that you're thinking about hiring, because coaches these days are charging, $5, $10, $15, $20,000 for coaching packages. And because they are offering transformation, not an hourly rate, because transformation will take you so much farther. And it's actually a beautiful way to offer transformation when it's done right. And so in order to avoid this feeling, I guess, of being manipulated, which people have shared with me, they have felt the unauthenticity, I just really invite you to be present. Like, first of all, don't spend a lot of time on social media. If there's somebody that you're thinking about hiring, you just need to connect with that person on the phone. Don't ever hire a person without connecting on the phone and really like understanding their energy. And then I'm I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to equip you with some empowering questions to basically qualify your coach or your mentor. So it's really important that you also enter that space from a place of being really grounded and understanding what it is that you need. Because if you enter a relationship, any relationship, from a trauma response, it's already unhealthy. I mean, in my opinion. So when we can enter from a really grounded place and like feel really centered and understand what is coming up for us and what we need, we can enter that relationship from a healthy way. We can communicate more openly. We can speak our truth. But it really takes a commitment and a practice to understand how we're feeling and what we need. And many of us have become disconnected. We have a heart wall up. If you're familiar with emotion code, right? Like you've just guarded your heart and you just keep going and you keep doing and you're busy, yet you're feeling unfulfilled. And that's because we've become disconnected because it's been uncomfortable to be connected. We feel sensitive. We feel, maybe you can identify as an empath and just noticing that it's challenging. I will tell you, as an empowered empath myself, that is an invitation for self-work. I became so sensitive as an empath many, many years ago when I was participating in women's retreats and doing a lot of healing around, the feminine, that I was actually pulled into a trauma vortex of somebody else because I was taking on everything clairvoyantly, clairaudiently, energetically that person was experiencing, and it overcame me. So I did a lot of self-work around, like, why was that happening? What was the need underneath that was allowing me to be pulled in or to go in, to choose subconsciously to be in somebody else's healing space? And I knew that in order for me to keep moving forward and doing women's work and emotional empowerment, that I really needed to clear that and understand where that was coming from. So lastly, what I want to say, one of the areas that I see, so just to recap, we talked about spiritual bypassing, the law of attraction, manipulation, and also just giving presence to the fact that when something is hurting for you, that you didn't do anything to attract that sometimes there are just really, really shitty people in the world. And, having the support that you need during that it just can be life-changing. So I want you to really take away that if you're going through something challenging right now, you didn't do anything wrong. You don't deserve that. You didn't attract that. It's information that you can use to just learn from it and to take the next step forward. So it's so important, please, 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 if you're in something really, really difficult right now, because I know a lot of people are. I mean, in my world, the divorce rate, breakups in business partnerships and marriages and jobs and health was pretty high the past couple years. So if you're in something really hard, just give yourself compassion for where you are. You didn't do anything wrong to attract this. You are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. You don't need to be healed, like complete. That everything is just a process and a journey, and just to keep taking that next step forward. People will show up in your life at the right time. And so it is your choice if you're willing to, accept that support or not. It will happen. Randomly, somebody will send a podcast to you, or you'll hear a name 3 times in, 2 days, or a post shows up. And, just be curious about those coincidences. So the last one that I want to share is scarcity. Scarcity is lack of trust, in my opinion, period. And so, the course that I created around prosperity consciousness is all about leaning into trust. So when you start noticing that people, how is that spiritual? How is scarcity spiritual at all? If you don't do this, you won't have this. No, every single person on this planet, in my opinion, and what I believe, if we're gonna, kind of wrap this in a spiritual context, was born and created from unconditional love by God. You can call it source, energy, divine, whatever. That's my word. Feels good for me to say that. It's really the same for me. It's, just it's unconditional love. And so there is nothing you have to do. There is nothing you have to do to earn love. Nothing. Every single person on this planet, no matter how crappy they are, no matter what they've done, because if they did something horrible, and I know it's hard to have compassion for people who've done horrible things, but they're hurting in some way. They may have been doing horrible things for so long they don't even know anymore, but at some point in time, that person was a child. That person was an infant, was a baby that came into this world with needs, probably to be loved by mom. Like, that's probably like the first need an infant has is food, right? And so mom provides that, just to be loved and nurtured, and by dad too, but I'm thinking more in the sense of like, what we need for survival. We need food, we need love. So scarcity to me is not spiritual. If people are using negative words, if people are using harsh words, if people are not taking self-responsibility for the way that they show up, if people are blaming or projecting, if people are speaking in terms of manipulation, or, you even got to be careful, I think, with like the idea of conspiracy theory. Like, at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own experience. I get that there is a need to not trust a lot of things happening in the world. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about trusting in yourself. I'm talking about the word trust. Trusting in God. Trusting in just the overall experience. There are broken pieces, there are broken people in every form of human expression on this planet. I mean, I think we've all been there a time or two, and people make mistakes. That doesn't mean that it's okay for people to just act a certain way. I'm not saying that there are things happening in this world that need to change, because they do, and our voices matter in order to create a shift and change. But just really be mindful when you hear people talk in a really kind of angry and resentful voice, and when they talk in terms of like scarcity or too much lack of trust, and just notice for yourself. I think that there's a really delicate, fine line to walk in that space. I myself don't think that I have mastered it. It takes a really kind of special person, I think, to be able to come from a place of having a passion to create change without letting their own internal anger sort of cross the boundary, or their own internal scarcity or lack of trust. It's a fine line to walk. Yeah, I think it's really delicate space, the space between, scarcity and trust, or lack, and moving into what I like to call prosperity consciousness, which is trusting, because one of the biggest mistakes I made recently was trusting the wrong person. So there's a shadow to living in that consciousness of trust too, because it's really all about trusting yourself and your connection to grace. That's really what it's about. But so many of us have become disconnected from that feeling or sensation. So thank you so much for joining me on this show today. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear what came through for you. If you've had these experiences, just know that I hear you, I see you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault. And I just want to encourage you to just know that there are a lot of really good, heartfelt, beautiful people out there willing to hold space for your transformation, and also in spiritual communities. And just know that everybody in those communities is also human. And so we're all navigating and, we all make mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm just willing to talk about them. I'm also willing to lean in, learn, and grow from them. And really just, and maybe there's a shadow in that too. I'm open to that. But just know that there are beautiful communities, particularly of sisterhood. I've participated in them. I lead them. And it's a really beautiful space for transformation, to invite trust in, for growth, for healers and coaches and women, mothers, corporate, like everybody is welcome. And just know that it does exist. And if you've had a bad experience in the past, I hope that something that I shared with you today can help you and just give you the confidence to move forward and be supported in some type of tribe or community or sisterhood that feels really good for you. But to my brothers out there, you as well, I happen to just create space for women. I've held space for men healing at retreats, and it was just absolutely beautiful. So I'm sending you all love as well, because without you, we won't be uplifted in the way that we can be. So you all matter too. And I'd love to just hear your thoughts on this episode. I kept it a little raw, I kept it a little real, and I just kind of came in and spoke in a totally, different way, and just wanted to address some things that I've been hearing. So I appreciate your feedback. And for those of you that want to hear more about different things on the show, let me know. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Aloha.
The content of this podcast is to educate, inspire, and inform you of pathways to an embodied healing self. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice from your medical doctor, therapist, registered dietitian, or nutritionist for any questions you may have regarding your diagnosis or condition.
Hello, friends, and thank you so much for being a part of this community and listening in to the Embodied Healing Self podcast. I am deeply honored that you have chosen to listen in and be present with me today. I love and cherish and appreciate each and every one of you joining me for conscious conversations around embodied healing and accessing your soul wisdom. I would love to gift you my meditation bundle and my Energized and Aligned ebook and guide to help you live in alignment with more energy and flow throughout the year. You can find these on my website at www.jenmons.com/tribe. I have one small request for you to help and share the love that we share together on this show. In order for other like and light-minded listeners to listen in on the show, we need reviews. For this show to show up on social media platforms and come into their space of awareness around the topics that we share on the show. You can check out my website at jenmons.com/podcast to leave a review. And also check out other episodes that we've shared on the show. I personally read each and every review that comes through, and I would love to share some love and give you a shout out for your support on my show for leaving a review. Thank you again so much for joining in every week. With love, gratitude, and aloha, yours truly, Jen Mons and the Embodied Healing Self podcast.